Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about housing during your residency training or fellowship training in the US. So, the question is, do you need to buy a house or just rent an apartment for the whole duration of your training? As a foreign medical graduate coming from the Philippines, I could not afford to buy a house when I first moved here in the US. I didn't have a line of credit, which some of the housing market would require a good credit score for you to buy a house, and I thought it was just too expensive for me with the salary that I was getting during residency training. You have to think about it like if you buy a house, then you will need to pay for the mortgage and then pay for taxes, of course. You have to pay for insurance. And then on top of that, you have to have maintenance fees, which, as a doctor or even during training, you could probably afford that. But I didn't really thought much about buying a house. I settled into renting an apartment, which I would like to talk to you tonight about my experiences or my experience and during my training. So I decided to go for an apartment, and as soon as I got my visa approved, I started looking for an apartment 15 to 20 minutes away or close to the hospital that I was going to train. So I started to Google search for those areas with relatively inexpensive rent and uh, close to the hospital, basically, because as a resident you'll be on call most of the time. And I was also thinking that if I live closer to the hospital, that would save me a lot with transportation costs like gas, or I don't even need to buy a car. So I'm talking about New York City, which is, for finding an apartment is already expensive in itself. I ended up sharing the apartment. It's a two-bedroom apartment, one bathroom, 15 to 20 minutes away from the hospital by walking. And I had one of the first year residents who I was like batchmates with to share. So we split the cost. It was about 1,800 a month. We split the cost, and then on top of that you have to pay for the bills, of course, for your gas, electricity. We didn't have any cable TV because we thought internet should suffice, because we can always watch whatever shows, or if we want to. So we used pad mapper for searching for this apartment. uh, they they wanted someone from the US to vouch for us, and we ended up asking for that person to tell basically the owner that these guys are legit. Like, we had to photocopy our passport, some government ID, social security, and then we also had to photocopy the hospital contract saying that we are actually doctors in training. And you know if they see that you're a doctor, then that's usually a catch for most of these landlords. I'm telling you, you should start looking for an apartment as soon as you get your visa, and then make sure that you have someone, or at least you have like a couple of days to check the area plus the apartment itself, because you don't want to be living in a miserable place, because this will be at least a year. Most of these apartments would require their tenants to stay for at least a year. So the lease goes to a year, and then either you have to renew that or you sign the contract for 3 years. But for most of the apartments that we saw, we had to lease basically every year and change our lease. So we got lucky. The place was so close, like probably 10, 12 minutes walking, and it was close to the city in Manhattan. And our neighbors were quiet, which helped a lot, because you need to sleep when you're post call. and also you need to study for your boards or even for the in-service exam. So one thing about being close is that during like if you have storms or flooding or hurricanes, then we were always on call. Like we were the first people to get called in to man either the ER or the NICU. But overall, the apartment itself was comfortable for us. And for 3 years we were there during our training. It was kind of expensive, but in the long run, we thought we got lucky. Uh, we didn't really try to get those expensive ones just because we have plans for whatever salary we have during the residency training. So for myself, I spent money on the apartment, and then food, of course, and then I was still sending money back home to the Philippines. So that's it. I mean, you probably need a month, even 2 to 3 weeks, to scout for a place. Now, one thing that you can do is if there are any graduating residents, you should ask them first if they have any apartments that they would recommend, or if you can take over their apartment. This happened to me and my batchmates, but we ended up looking for a quote unquote better apartment for ourselves. Now, if you really want to save money, it would be great if you can find like a relative or family who's here in the US, and if they're fine, then you you can talk about staying there for the duration of your training, or when you're transitioning from outside the US to your life here in the US. I didn't really have any relatives here. Most of my relatives were in the West Coast in California. But looking back, I would not trade that experience of getting our own apartment just because you have your own private place and you get to experience being in the US, transitioning here by yourself, exploring, having like doing the adventures and searching and learning the culture when you have your own private place. If you have any questions, you can write your comments, but those are the things that I can think or I can recall during my residency training. I wish you good luck, and if you're watching this, congratulations. I think you're here, you're ready, and congratulations. I'm happy for you. Have a good time.